The food truck was a lifeline, both for the woman running it and the customers who depended on it. It wasn't glamorous, but it was hers. Each morning before the sun had fully risen, she was already awake, gathering supplies for the day. She always knew that her truck was more than just a place to work. It was where she could truly be herself, where she could serve others and feel like she was making a difference in her own small way. That particular day started just like any other. The steady hum of the truck's engine was a familiar comfort, the sound almost like music in her ears. She set up the menu board, brushed the dust off the countertop, and prepared herself for the steady stream of customers who would pass by in search of something warm and filling. Her food truck was tucked away on a busy street corner near an office complex, where workers rushed to grab lunch during their short breaks. The weather was warm, with a slight breeze that helped push away the midday heat, which made it a little easier to work in the cramped space. As the day went on, customers came and went. Some were regulars who ordered the same thing every time. Others were passing through, trying the truck out for the first time. She didn't mind either way. Her job was simple: prepare good food and serve it with a smile. She prided herself on always treating her customers well, no matter how busy she was. It wasn't easy work, and there were long hours, but the satisfaction of providing for others kept her going. Around noon, the line grew longer. It was typical for this time of day, as workers from nearby offices would break for lunch. She took each order with practiced ease, moving quickly behind the counter to assemble the food as efficiently as possible. The scent of sizzling vegetables, grilled meat, and warm spices filled the air. Her hands were covered in a mixture of flour and grease, but it didn't bother her. She'd long since gotten used to the mess, and the work felt fulfilling. Amidst the rush, a man stepped up to the counter. At first glance, he didn't seem like someone who would frequent a food truck. His sharp suit, expensive watch, and polished shoes stood out against the more casual attire of the other customers. But he wasn't the first well-dressed person she had seen in line. She didn't give it much thought. After all, the food truck was a popular spot, and it drew people from all walks of life. The man ordered a simple sandwich, nothing extravagant, and she quickly began preparing it. He didn't make small talk or try to engage with her. He just waited, watching her work with a focused expression. There was something about him that seemed different from the others, but she couldn't put her finger on it. He had an air of confidence about him, almost as if he were used to being in charge. She had seen people like him before, people who were always in control, always on top. But she didn't pay him much mind. There were always other customers to attend to, and time was precious during the lunch rush. As she handed him his sandwich, their eyes met for a brief moment. There was something about his gaze that made her pause, but she quickly brushed it off, handing him the change and wishing him a good day. He nodded politely but didn't say anything. Just as she was about to turn away to handle the next order, the man spoke. "Still remember me?" he asked, his voice low, almost a whisper. The words caught her off guard. She blinked, unsure if she had heard him correctly. She looked at him again, trying to see if there was any hint of familiarity in his features. But she didn't recognize him. He seemed important, maybe even famous, but she couldn't place him. He smiled faintly, as if reading her confusion. "It's been a while," he said, before turning and walking away. She stood there for a moment, staring after him as he blended into the crowd of lunchtime rushers. Her mind was racing. What did he mean by that? She had no idea who he was, and yet something about the way he spoke to her felt strangely familiar. Had they met before? Maybe he was a regular customer, someone she'd served a few times in the past, or was he someone from her past? Someone she hadn't seen in years. She shook her head and focused on the next customer in line, trying to push the encounter from her mind. It was just a random moment, a stranger making a casual comment. No need to dwell on it, but even as she moved through the rest of the afternoon, the words echoed in her head. "Still remember me?" The rest of the day passed in a blur of orders, conversations, and the steady rhythm of the food truck. By the time the last customer had left and she was cleaning up for the night, her mind was still preoccupied with the man's words. She couldn't get him out of her head. There was something about him that made her think he wasn't just another anonymous face in the crowd. And yet she couldn't figure out why. That night, as she sat alone in her small apartment, the encounter replayed over and over in her mind. She sat on the couch, idly scrolling through her phone. but her thoughts kept drifting back to the man from the food truck. She kept wondering who he was. Was he someone important? Did he really know her from before? Or had she just imagined the whole thing? The more she thought about it, the more she realized that she couldn't shake the feeling that there was something significant about the encounter. She wished she could remember, but her memory failed her. There was no way to know for sure. Still, it didn't change the fact that the moment had left an impression on her. It was strange, unsettling even. She had met countless people in her life, but none had made her feel the way he did. And now, with nothing to go on but a few words and a vague sense of familiarity, she couldn't stop thinking about him. Tomorrow, the truck would be back in the same spot, and the routine would start again. But this time it would be different. She knew it. Something had shifted in her, something that told her this strange encounter might just be the beginning of something bigger than she could ever imagine. The following day started like any other. The sun peeked through the early morning sky, and the steady hum of the city began to fill the air as people rushed to work. The woman woke up to the familiar sound of her alarm clock, signaling another day of long hours ahead. She stretched and rubbed her eyes, the routine of opening her food truck becoming second nature to her now. She had been running the truck for a few years, and, though it wasn't easy, she loved the independence it gave her. As she packed her things and made her way to the truck, she found herself thinking back to the man from yesterday. The memory of his words, "Still remember me?" still lingered in her mind. She couldn't help but replay the moment over and over. It was as if something about him had left a mark on her, but she couldn't figure out what. She parked the truck at the usual corner, unloading everything she needed for the day. There was a buzz of activity in the air as the city slowly came to life. The workers from the nearby office buildings would be out soon, eager to grab their lunch. She adjusted her apron and ran through her usual checklist in her head. Prep the food, set up the counter, and be ready for the rush. As the morning passed, she kept her focus on the task at hand, making sure everything was running smoothly. The truck was busy as usual, with a steady flow of customers coming and going. The woman moved quickly, chopping vegetables, stirring sauces, and flipping burgers, all while keeping a friendly smile on her face. She had developed a rhythm over the years, a kind of dance she did with the orders, and it was all second nature to her. But as the line grew longer, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was different. Her thoughts kept drifting back to the man from yesterday, and she found herself looking up every time someone new walked up to the counter. She couldn't explain it, but she was hoping, no, expecting that he would come back. It didn't make sense. He had just been another customer, someone she'd served in passing. But his question, the way he spoke to her, had left a strange impression. "Still remember me?" What did that even mean? Around midday, just as she was getting into the flow of things, he appeared again. The man in the suit stood in line, looking as polished and composed as he had the day before. This time, however, he wasn't just another face in the crowd. She recognized him instantly. Her heart skipped a beat as she caught sight of him, and her mind raced to put together the pieces. He had come back. He didn't make a move to come forward immediately. Instead, he waited for a few moments, glancing around the food truck area, as if assessing the crowd. She couldn't understand why he was there again. Was he really just here for lunch, or was there something more to this strange encounter? She could feel his presence even as he stood in line, as though his very being was asking for her attention. As the line moved forward, he eventually reached the counter. He looked at her with the same steady gaze, the one that had made her feel so uneasy the day before. This time, she couldn't just brush it off. She was aware of him in a way she hadn't been before. He was standing there looking at her, but he didn't speak right away. She couldn't help but wonder why he was back. "Hey," he said casually, as if they had met up for a quick chat. His voice was calm, almost like he was inviting her into a conversation, but she still didn't know what to make of him. She looked up, trying to keep things professional, even though the situation felt anything but. "What can I get for you today?" she asked, trying to sound normal. He smiled slightly, the same subtle, knowing smile that had been on his face the day before. "Just the usual," he said, his eyes scanning the menu like he hadn't already seen it 100 times before. "But, I'm not sure if you remember me." Her heart gave a little jolt. The words she had been dreading to hear came out. Again, "Still remember me?" This time she couldn't hide the confusion in her face. She wasn't sure how to respond. Should she admit that she didn't know who he was, or should she play along and pretend she remembered him? She hesitated, biting her lip. "I'm sorry," she said, forcing a polite smile, "but I don't think I do." He didn't seem offended by her response. Instead, his smile deepened and he leaned in slightly as if to make sure she could hear him. "It's okay. I don't expect you to. I just wanted to know if you remembered that day. The day when you helped me." His tone was soft, almost reflective. Her eyebrows furrowed as she tried to place him, but the memory still didn't come. She didn't know if it was because her mind was clouded with the busyness of the day or because she truly didn't remember. "I'm sorry," she repeated. "I don't—" He held up a hand, cutting her off. "It's okay. You don't have to remember. It's just, I never forgot." There was something about the way he said it that made her pause. It wasn't just a casual statement. It was loaded with meaning. "I'll take the usual," he added, as though he had said all he needed to say. She nodded, still feeling a little uneasy. She quickly made the sandwich, trying to shake off the strange feeling that had settled in her chest. When she handed him the food, he didn't immediately walk away. Instead, he paused and looked at her, his eyes thoughtful. "You don't have to remember me," he said again, his voice quiet. "But I just wanted to let you know that what you did all those years ago, it meant a lot to me." He reached into his pocket, pulling out a business card and handing it to her. "If you ever want to talk or if you need anything, just give me a call. I'm not sure what life's been like for you, but I know I'll always be grateful for what you did." Before she could say anything, he turned and walked away, disappearing into the crowd as if nothing had happened. The woman stood there for a long moment, staring at the business card in her hand. What just happened, she thought. She had served him food, just like she did every other customer. But somehow this was different. She felt a sense of weight to the encounter, as if the words he had spoken carried more meaning than she could understand. The rest of the day passed in a blur, and the woman couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed. She found herself constantly thinking about the man. She knew he wasn't just some random customer. He was someone who had crossed her path long ago, and now, years later, he was back. The question was why, and what did it mean for her? That evening, after closing the truck and cleaning up, she sat at her small kitchen table, staring at the business card he had left behind. It seemed like such a simple gesture, a card with a name and a number. But to her, it felt like a doorway to something much bigger. The phone number was just a number, but in her mind, it represented something more. It was an invitation. But what kind of invitation was it? She didn't know yet. But she knew one thing for sure. This encounter had left her with more questions than answers, and she couldn't shake the feeling that her life was about to change in ways she never expected. The night passed quietly, but her mind raced. The weight of the business card he had left behind sat heavily in her thoughts, its edges sharp in her fingers as she turned it over again and again. What does it mean? She had been over their conversation 100 times, but it still didn't make sense. He had come back for a reason. The question that lingered in her mind was why. The next day, she woke up feeling more uncertain than ever. The truck awaited her, its familiar hum and steady rhythm ready to bring another day of routine. But nothing felt routine anymore. She couldn't shake the feeling that her life was on the cusp of a change. She had no idea what that change would look like, but she had a deep, nagging feeling that it would come soon, whether she was ready for it or not. When she arrived at the food truck, everything seemed normal. The line of customers was forming and the rush was beginning. She tried to focus on her work, keeping her hands moving, her mind distracted by the familiar motions of preparing food. She chopped vegetables, stirred sauces, and served the customers, with a smile even as her thoughts remained far away. The day was busy, just like always. But in the back of her mind, she couldn't stop thinking about the man. As lunchtime approached, she caught sight of someone standing at the end of the line. Her heart skipped a beat. It was him, the man in the suit. She could see him even from a distance, his posture straight, the way he scanned the area like he was searching for someone. She could feel her breath catch in her throat as he stepped forward, his eyes briefly meeting hers before he approached the counter. It was strange. Yesterday, when he had come up to her, she had been caught off guard, but now she wasn't just surprised to see him again. She was expecting him. Maybe she had been waiting for him to return, though she hadn't admitted it to herself until now. When he reached the counter, she greeted him politely, though her heart was racing. "What can I get for you today?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. She didn't know what else to say. She hadn't expected him to return, not after their brief exchange yesterday. He looked at her, a slight smile on his lips. "I'll take the usual," he said, his tone light. But there was something different about him today. He didn't seem like a stranger anymore. There was an intimacy in the way he looked at her, as though he already knew everything about her, even though they had barely spoken. As she made his order, he lingered at the counter watching her work. The silence between them was heavier this time, and she found herself stealing glances at him when she thought he wasn't looking. He didn't seem in a hurry, like the others who were always rushing back to work. He was just there, standing calmly as if the rest of the world had faded away. Once she handed him his food, he didn't leave right away. Instead, he took a step closer, his gaze focused on her, as if he had something important to say. She felt a wave of anxiety wash over her, and for a moment she thought she might say something awkward, but he spoke before she had the chance. "You're still wondering, aren't you?" His voice was soft, almost a whisper, but there was a knowing edge to it. She didn't know what to say. "Wondering about what?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. It was clear that he knew exactly what was going through her mind. He leaned in slightly, lowering his voice. "You're wondering why I'm here, why I keep coming back. It's not just the food. It's you." His eyes were intense, and she found herself captivated by the sincerity in them. She felt a tightness in her chest, her thoughts racing. Why me, she wondered. What does he want from me? "I know you don't remember," he continued, "but I remember everything. I remember the day you helped me when I needed it most. You probably don't even realize how much it meant to me." She could feel her confusion deepening. The moment yesterday when he had asked if she remembered him had been odd, but now, hearing him talk about it again, she felt even more lost. She had no recollection of ever helping him, of ever being part of his life. And yet he seemed so certain that she had done something important for him. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "I really don't remember." He nodded, a sad smile crossing his face. "That's okay. You weren't supposed to remember, but I'll never forget." She felt the weight of his words settle around them. There was a long silence as she finished preparing another order. She didn't know how to respond to him, and she didn't want to say something that might make the situation even more awkward, but she couldn't deny the connection that was forming between them, no matter how hard she tried to push it away. He paused for a moment as if deciding whether to say something more. "Look, I know this is all a lot, but I wanted to tell you that I'm grateful. I've never forgotten what you did. It was a turning point for me." She looked at him, still trying to make sense of it all. "I don't understand," she said, shaking her head. "What did I do? I don't even know who you are." His gaze softened, and he reached into his pocket, pulling out the business card he had given her the day before. "Maybe this will help jog your memory," he said quietly, sliding the card across the counter. She hesitated for a moment, then picked up the card. It was the same as before, a simple white card with his name and number printed in clean, elegant letters. But this time something about it felt different. It wasn't just a business card. It was a key to something that had been locked away in her past. "I don't expect you to call me right away," he said, his voice gentle. "But when you're ready, when you understand why I'm here, just reach out. I'm not going anywhere." She nodded slowly, her mind reeling. She didn't know what to say. She didn't know what to think. He had left her with more questions than answers, and yet she could feel the pull of his words. Something inside of her knew that whatever this was, it was far from over. As he turned to walk away, she watched him leave, her thoughts swirling in a storm of uncertainty. What had just happened? Why had he returned to her life after all these years? And why did she feel like her entire world was about to change? The rest of the day passed in a blur. The lunch rush continued and customers came and went, but she couldn't focus. Every time she glanced at the business card, it felt like it was pulling her in, as if it held the answer to all the questions that had been plaguing her. When the day finally ended and she closed the truck for the night, she sat down on the bench outside, staring at the card in her hand. She knew she had to make a decision. She could either let the past stay buried and move on with her life, or she could follow this strange thread and see where it led. But no matter which path she chose, she knew one thing for certain: she couldn't ignore him anymore. As she stood up and walked toward her apartment, she knew that the next step was up to her. She didn't have the answers yet, but something told her she was about to find them. The days that followed were filled with a strange tension. She couldn't quite explain it, but everything seemed to be moving with a kind of urgency. Her thoughts kept returning to him, the man in the suit. Every time she opened her food truck in the morning, there was a nagging sense that something big was about to happen, but she had no idea what it was or how to prepare for it. Each morning, the rhythm of the truck kept her busy, prepping the food, setting up the counter, and interacting with the steady stream of customers. But no matter how hard she tried to focus on her work, her mind would drift. She would find herself wondering about the man, his life, why he'd come back after all these years, and why his simple words had stirred something inside her that she hadn't felt in a long time. She couldn't stop thinking about him. It had been a few days since their last encounter, and he hadn't returned to the food truck, but she kept looking for him, almost as if she were expecting him to show up at any moment. She had been avoiding calling the number he'd given her, afraid that it might lead to a conversation she wasn't ready for, a conversation that could change everything. One afternoon, as she was serving a group of office workers who had come by for their lunch break, she saw a familiar figure in the distance. There, standing at the end of the line, was the man. Her heart skipped a beat, and for a moment she felt paralyzed. She had been hoping he would return, but now that he was here, she wasn't sure what to do. She had hoped for this moment, and yet it felt overwhelming. She quickly turned her attention back to the group in front of her, trying to focus on them, but it was hard to concentrate. Her mind kept drifting back to him. He didn't move immediately, staying at the back of the line for a while, as if waiting for the right moment to approach. When it was finally his turn, he stepped forward with a calm, composed demeanor, his eyes meeting hers as he approached the counter. There was no longer any awkwardness between them, no uncomfortable silence. They both seemed to understand each other without saying a word. "Hey," he greeted her softly, a hint of a smile on his lips. She returned the smile, though it was hesitant. "Hi," she said, her voice a little softer than usual. She wasn't sure what to expect, but she knew this conversation would be different from the last. "I've been thinking about our last conversation," he said, "and I think we need to talk. I know this probably feels like it came out of nowhere, but I've got to tell you something." Her curiosity piqued, she nodded slowly. She wasn't sure what he was about to say, but she could feel the tension building between them. She handed him his usual order, hoping that doing something familiar would help calm her nerves. But her hands felt shaky as she worked, and she tried to hide it. He took the food from her and paused, looking at her intently. "You don't have to say anything right now," he continued. "But I want you to know that I didn't just come back to see you because I wanted lunch. I came back because there's something I need to tell you. Something you should know." She swallowed, her heart thudding in her chest. She had no idea what he was about to say, but the way he spoke made her feel like whatever it was important. It wasn't just about a random encounter from the past, it was something much deeper than that. "I've been carrying this with me for a long time," he said, his voice low. "And I've been trying to find the right way to explain it to you. But I think now is the time. You deserve to know." The weight of his words hung in the air, and she found herself unsure of what to say. She wasn't sure if she should tell him to go ahead and explain, or if she should wait until she had a clearer idea of what was going on. But she knew she couldn't ignore him anymore. She had been avoiding the truth for too long, and now it was right in front of her. He continued, his gaze steady. "Years ago, when we met, you helped me in a way that I couldn't even begin to explain. I was at a crossroads in my life, and I didn't know which way to turn. I had just started my company, and I was struggling. You probably don't even remember, but you gave me a piece of advice, something so simple that I never forgot it. You told me to trust my instincts and to keep going even when things seemed impossible." Her mind flashed back to that day. She hadn't remembered it clearly at first, but now it was coming back to her. It was a brief conversation. Just a few words exchanged during a time when she had felt that her life was in limbo. She remembered helping someone once, someone who seemed to be struggling, but she hadn't realized the depth of how much it had impacted them. "I never forgot that," he said, his voice filled with emotion. "I never forgot you. That one moment, those words you gave me, changed everything for me. It was the push I needed to keep going, to believe that success was possible. And now here I am, standing in front of you, not as a guy who was struggling, but as someone who made it." She looked at him, stunned. The man in front of her wasn't just any CEO. He was someone whose life had been shaped by a brief encounter with her, a chance moment she hadn't thought much about, but which had meant the world to him. "I owe everything to that moment," he continued. "I wouldn't be where I am today if it weren't for you. And I know I didn't say it then, but I've been trying to figure out how to show you what that meant, how to thank you." She didn't know how to respond. She was overwhelmed by the depth of his words, by the realization that something so small to her had made such a huge impact on his life. It felt like a dream, but it was real. He had built an empire, all because of a brief conversation with her years ago. "You don't owe me anything," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't do anything special. I was just trying to help. I didn't know that it would make a difference." He shook his head, smiling. "You helped more than you'll ever know." She stood there, processing what he had just said. Her mind was spinning, trying to make sense of it all. She had spent so many years thinking that she was just getting by, trying to make it from one day to the next. But this man, this CEO, was telling her that her simple act of kindness had changed his entire life. The silence between them stretched for a moment, and she finally spoke, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "So what now?" she asked, her words hanging in the air. "What do we do with this moment?" He smiled again, a more relaxed, genuine smile this time. "I don't know what happens next, but I think we start by taking it one step at a time. You've helped me in ways I can't fully describe, and now maybe it's time I help you." She looked at him, her heart racing. She had no idea what that meant, but she knew that everything was about to change. The world she had known, her life as a food truck owner just getting by, was no longer enough for her. She had done what she could with the tools she had, but maybe now it was time to take that leap into something bigger, something unknown. He handed her a business card, just like before, but this time it felt different. It wasn't just a card anymore. It was a symbol of something more, an invitation, a bridge to a future she had never imagined. "I'm here if you ever want to talk," he said. "But I think the real question is, are you ready to see what's possible?" She stood there holding the card in her hand, knowing that the next step was hers to take. Whatever the future held, one thing was certain. This moment, this encounter, had changed her forever. The days that followed felt like a whirlwind. She couldn't quite put her finger on it, but everything had changed. The moment she had held the business card in her hand, something inside her had shifted. It wasn't just the card, but what it represented, the possibility of something more. The chance for a future she had never dared to imagine. She had spent days thinking about it, replaying the conversation over and over in her mind. The man had opened a door to a world she had never thought was within her reach. He had shown her that there was more to life than the daily grind of running her food truck. She had always worked hard, always given her best. But now she was beginning to wonder if there was something bigger waiting for her. But at the same time, doubt crept in. She had always been the one to work alone, to make do with what she had. The idea of stepping into a new world, a world filled with people who had more money, more power, more influence, it was intimidating. She had never thought of herself as someone who could belong in that world. She'd always been just a girl with a food truck doing what she loved. And yet there was a part of her that couldn't ignore the pull of something greater. The days went by in a blur, and each time she passed by the food truck, she wondered if she should reach out, if she should take that leap. It wasn't like her to hesitate, but this was different. This wasn't just about serving lunch to people anymore. It was about her future, and she didn't know if she was ready to face it. One morning, as she was cleaning the truck after another busy rush, she found herself staring at the business card again. She had kept it in her wallet, close enough to remind her of the possibilities, but far enough away to keep the fear at bay. But now something inside her told her it was time to stop hiding from it. She pulled out her phone and stared at the number. Her thumb hovered over the screen as her heart pounded in her chest. What if it's too late? What if he's moved on? She thought. But deep down, she knew that if she didn't make this move, she would always wonder what could have been. With a deep breath, she pressed the call button. It rang once, then twice. She could feel her pulse quicken. Would he even pick up? Maybe he had forgotten about her. Maybe he was too busy with his life, with his success. The line clicked and his voice came through, smooth and calm. Hello? For a moment, she couldn't find her voice. She hadn't expected it to be this real, this immediate. But then she found the words and they tumbled out before she could second-guess herself. Hi, she said, her voice trembling slightly. It's me, from the food truck. There was a pause on the other end, and then she heard his familiar warm laugh. I thought I'd hear from you soon, he said, his tone light as though this was just another part of a bigger plan. How have you been? She couldn't help but smile, feeling a little more at ease. I've been good. Busy, she said. And you? I've been waiting, he said simply. I knew you'd call when you were ready. That simple sentence sent a wave of relief over her. He wasn't upset with her for taking so long. He hadn't moved on. He was still there waiting for her to take the first step. I'm ready, she said, the words feeling more natural now. I don't know what this means or where it will lead, but I think I need to see what's out there. I think I need to see what's possible. That's all I ever wanted, he said, his voice gentle. I never wanted you to feel pressured. I just wanted to show you that there's more to life than what you've known. I believe in you and I believe in what you're capable of. She felt a warmth spread through her at his words. For the first time in a long time, she felt like someone saw her, not just as a woman with a food truck, but as someone with potential, someone who deserved more than just getting by. You don't have to decide everything today, he continued. But when you're ready, I'll be here. And I'll help you however I can. She nodded, even though he couldn't see her. I'm ready, she repeated. I just don't know where to start. You start with trust, he said. Trust in yourself and trust in me. Together we can figure it out. It was simple advice, but it felt profound. She didn't need to have all the answers right away. She didn't need to know exactly where this path would lead. She just needed to take the first step. They talked for a while longer, and by the end of the conversation, she felt lighter. The weight of uncertainty had lifted, and she could finally breathe again. She was no longer trapped by the fear of the unknown. She had someone who believed in her, someone who was ready to help her make the leap. That evening, after hanging up the phone, she sat in her apartment, thinking about everything they had talked about. She had made the decision. She was ready to take that leap. But she knew it wouldn't be easy. The road ahead would be filled with challenges, doubts, and obstacles. But she also knew she had someone who would be there to guide her through it. Someone who had walked that path before and could help her navigate it. The next morning, she woke up early, her heart racing with excitement and anticipation. Today would be different. Today she was going to take that first step. She packed up her things, locked up her apartment, and drove to the food truck one last time. It had been a huge part of her life, and it always would be. But she knew now that it was time to move on, to take the opportunity that had been placed in front of her. When she arrived at the truck, she looked around at the familiar surroundings, the countertops, the grill, the menu board. It had all become second nature to her over the years, but now it felt like a chapter that was coming to a close. She sent a message to the man letting him know she was ready. She was going to take the leap. Within minutes, she received a reply. I'm proud of you, he said simply. You've made the right choice. She smiled to herself, feeling a sense of peace settle over her. It wasn't about leaving behind the truck. It was about moving toward something bigger, something that could help her grow. And for the first time in a long time, she felt ready for that growth. The decision was made. The leap had been taken. The future was hers to shape. The weeks that followed felt like a blur. She was no longer the same woman who had been running the food truck on the busy street corner. The shift had happened gradually, but the change was undeniable. Every step she took into this new life, into this new world, felt both exhilarating and terrifying. It wasn't just about the food anymore. It was about something bigger, something that reached far beyond what she had ever imagined. She spent the first few days feeling out of place. The world she was stepping into, the world of high-powered meetings, business dinners, and networking events, was so different from the life she had known. She found herself in fancy boardrooms, surrounded by people who spoke a language she wasn't used to. It was all about strategy, investments, and growth. She didn't know the first thing about any of it, and at times she felt overwhelmed by the conversations swirling around her. But she didn't let that stop her. She had made the decision to take this leap, and now she was going to embrace it. Every morning she woke up early, dressed in clothes that made her feel out of place but also somehow confident, and drove to the office where she was now a part of the team. Her mentor, the man who had guided her into this new life, was always there, offering advice and encouragement whenever she felt unsure. He had told her from the beginning that it wouldn't be easy, that there would be days when she felt like quitting. There were days when she thought he might be right. There were days when the weight of the unfamiliar world around her felt too heavy, when the pressure of the decisions she had to make was suffocating. But through it all, she reminded herself that she was here for a reason. She was here because she had chosen to be, because she had trusted herself enough to take that first step. One afternoon, after a particularly long and exhausting meeting, she found herself sitting in her office, staring out the window at the city below. The buildings seemed so distant, so impersonal, but somehow they also represented the possibility that lay ahead. For the first time, she felt like she had a real shot at making something of herself. She had always worked hard, but now she was learning to work smarter. She was starting to see that the key to success wasn't just about effort, it was about strategy, about making the right moves at the right time. The sound of her phone ringing broke her thoughts, and she glanced down to see his name on the screen. Her heart skipped a beat. She hadn't heard from him in a few days, and the feeling of uncertainty started creeping in again. But this time she was ready to face whatever he had to say. "Hello?" she answered, trying to sound calm, though she could feel the nerves bubbling up inside her. "Hey, how's it going?" His voice was smooth, as always, but there was a sense of curiosity beneath it. "I haven't heard from you in a while. How are things? How's the adjustment going?" She smiled to herself, grateful for his voice, the familiar tone that had become her anchor in this unfamiliar world. "It's been tough but good," she said honestly. "I'm learning a lot, but there are days when I feel like I'm in over my head." He chuckled, and she could hear the warmth in his laugh. "That's normal. It's all part of the process. You're doing great. You've already come so far. Just remember, it's okay to feel out of place sometimes. It doesn't mean you're not meant for this." She let out a breath she didn't know she had been holding. His reassurance always had a way of calming her, of making her feel like she wasn't alone in this journey. "Thanks, that helps. I guess I just keep wondering if I'm really cut out for this." "You are," he said firmly. "You wouldn't be here if you weren't. Don't doubt yourself. You've already proven that you have what it takes. Now all you need to do is keep pushing forward." They talked for a few more minutes, and by the time she hung up, she felt a renewed sense of determination. He had a way of making her believe in herself when she wasn't sure she could. He had been right from the beginning. It wasn't going to be easy, but it was going to be worth it. As the days turned into weeks, she started to settle into her new life. She had learned to navigate the world of business with more ease, finding her voice in meetings, making connections with the people around her, and starting to contribute ideas that were valued. She was no longer just the girl who ran a food truck. She was becoming someone who could hold her own in this new world. But it wasn't just about the work. She had changed in ways she hadn't expected. She had started to see herself differently. No longer was she the woman who stayed in the background, who didn't believe she deserved more than what she had. She was someone with potential, someone who could make a difference, someone who could build something meaningful. One evening, after a particularly rewarding meeting where her ideas had been well received, she found herself walking home through the city streets. The lights of the buildings shone brightly, and the hustle of the city felt almost comforting. She smiled to herself, feeling a deep sense of pride. She was doing it. She was really doing it. As she passed a small cafe, she paused for a moment, remembering her food truck days. She remembered the long hours, the sweat, the tiredness that seemed to always be there, but so was the satisfaction. She missed that life in some ways. How simple it had been, how clear her purpose had felt. But now she realized she had found a new purpose. She had found something that challenged her, something that pushed her to be better, something that made her believe in her own abilities. She walked into the cafe and ordered a coffee, sitting down to reflect on how far she had come. She wasn't sure where the journey would take her next, but she knew that she was no longer afraid of the unknown. She had learned that taking risks, stepping outside of her comfort zone, was the only way to grow. As she sipped her coffee, her phone buzzed again. It was a message from him. She smiled as she read the words, "Proud of you." Keep going. It was a simple message, but it meant the world to her. She wasn't alone in this journey. She had someone who believed in her, someone who was there every step of the way, guiding her when she needed it most. She sat back in her chair, letting the warmth of the coffee settle in. Whatever the future held, she was ready for it. She had already taken the biggest step of all, believing in herself. And now nothing could stop her. The days turned into weeks, and with each passing moment she felt herself transforming. The woman who had once run a food truck was now someone who was shaping her future, one decision at a time. But as much as she had embraced the new world around her, she was still learning. She still had moments of doubt, moments when she questioned whether she was truly ready for everything that lay ahead. It wasn't just about the work anymore. It wasn't just about meetings and strategy sessions. It was about a deeper understanding of herself, about what she was capable of, and about how much she was willing to push beyond her own boundaries. One afternoon, after another long meeting in the corporate office, she walked out into the cool breeze feeling both exhausted and exhilarated. The meeting had been productive, her ideas had been taken seriously, and she had started to feel like she truly belonged in this world. But even with all of the progress, there was still something inside her that felt unsettled. She knew that it wasn't about the work itself. It was about her journey, her own self-discovery, and where she was headed next. As she walked down the bustling street, the noise of the city seemed to fade away for a moment. It was as if everything around her had quieted, leaving only the hum of her thoughts. She wasn't sure where she was going, but for the first time in a while she felt the need to be alone, to reflect on everything she had experienced so far. She found herself in a small park, sitting on a bench by a fountain. The sound of the water flowing was soothing, and for a few moments she let herself just breathe. There was something calming about this place, a stillness that contrasted with the fast pace of the life she had stepped into. It reminded her of the days when she had worked on the food truck, when things were simpler, when she had known exactly what her purpose was. But now, things had changed. She had stepped into a world that was much bigger than the one she had known. She had made it here, and there was no turning back. The question, though, was where would she go from here? What was her next move? Her phone buzzed, snapping her out of her thoughts. It was a message from him. She smiled as she opened it. "How's everything going?" he asked, his message short but thoughtful as always. She typed back quickly. "Busy, good, but busy. I'm learning a lot, but sometimes it feels overwhelming." He replied almost immediately. "I knew it wouldn't be easy. But remember, you're doing something most people never get the chance to do. You're making something happen." She read his message, and a sense of gratitude washed over her. It was exactly what she needed to hear. For so long, she had lived in the shadow of self-doubt. But now, with his support, she was beginning to see herself in a new light. She wasn't just the woman who had a food truck. She wasn't just someone who had taken a chance. She was someone who was capable of so much more than she had ever imagined. The next few weeks passed in a blur. There were meetings, phone calls, and strategy sessions, all blending together into a whirlwind of activity. She found herself stepping up more and more, taking on tasks that pushed her out of her comfort zone. Every time she succeeded, she felt a small sense of accomplishment, but it was always followed by the next challenge, the next hurdle to overcome. One day, during a particularly important meeting, she found herself in front of a group of high-powered investors. She had been asked to present an idea she had been working on for weeks, a proposal for a new business venture that could take the company to the next level. It was her chance to prove herself, to show everyone what she was capable of. As she stood at the front of the room, her heart pounded in her chest. The room was filled with sharp suits, all of them watching her expectantly. She had never felt more exposed, more vulnerable. But then, as she began to speak, something shifted inside her. She remembered what he had said to her. "Trust in yourself." She took a deep breath, and the words began to flow. She spoke clearly, confidently, explaining her vision for the new venture. She described the potential market, the strategies that could be employed, and the way they could capitalize on an untapped opportunity. As she spoke, she could feel the energy in the room change. The investors were listening. They were engaged. And when she finished, there was a brief silence before one of them spoke up. "This is impressive," he said, his voice low but approving. "We hadn't considered this approach, but it's bold. It could work." She felt a wave of relief wash over her, followed by a rush of pride. She had done it. She had proven herself. And in that moment she realized that she wasn't just a part of this world. She was becoming a leader in it. After the meeting, she found herself walking back to her office, a smile on her face. The adrenaline from the presentation still surged through her, and she couldn't help but feel a sense of accomplishment. She had taken a risk, put herself out there, and it had paid off. When she got back to her desk, there was a message waiting for her. She smiled when she saw who it was from. "You did great today," he said. "I'm proud of you." She felt a rush of warmth as she read the message. His words always seemed to come at just the right time, reminding her that she wasn't in this alone. She wasn't just doing this for herself. She was doing it for something bigger, for the life she was building, for the future that was unfolding before her.